Over the years, we have seen the union government repeatedly enacting laws that encroach upon the state's powers and duties in several sectors, even on law and order, which is absolutely in the state's reach in the Constitution. Laws have been made by the Union in agriculture, education, power, cooperation, and so on, crippling the state's rights. Even a ministry for cooperation has been formed at the center. Multinational agreements are being entered into on issues that affect the states without seeking the state's opinion, let alone getting their consent. The body blow to India's federal structure is coming from the union eating into the state's financial resources. It is now evident that the same people who preach cooperative federalism have tried to undercut the resources to be allocated to the states by the Finance Commission. On top of that, we are seeing the union's allocation for their own schemes coming down year after year, while the states are being forced to chip in more and more. According to RBI reports, the states are having to cover a substantial 65% of the country's total expenses, with the union's contribution being only 35%. But when it comes to revenue sharing, it goes in the reverse direction. And the revenue through which the union is meddling into states' affairs is through the governors appointed by them. Constitutionally, governors are to exercise their duties on the advice of the state cabinets. However, we have seen governors in opposition ruled states acting at the behest of the powers that appointed them, that is, the union government. We are all familiar with the case that was filed by the Delhi state government in the Honorable Supreme Court and the verdict of the Constitution bench. However, within days of that landmark judgment, in which the Honorable Chief Justice opined that, quote, a constitutionally entrenched and democratically elected government needs to have control over its administration, unquote. The union government introduced an ordinance and subsequently replaced it with a bill in the parliament. It proves to us that the union government will go forward with their authoritarian tendencies to any extent to usurp the rights of the states. We have seen gubernatorial excesses in Punjab, West Bengal, Odisha, Telangana, Tamil Nadu, and so on. In many states, including ours, we have seen governors trying to overreach their constitutional mandate by meddling with the autonomy of the legislature. I have already referred to how assent to bills passed by Legislative Assembly have been indefinitely delayed. In this context, as it is to be noted that the Supreme Court did warn the governors that they were playing with fire, yet governors continue to play their political games at the behest of their masters. Multiple state governments have had to approach the judiciary against such undemocratic high-handedness. I had mentioned about our experiences with the offices of the governor and chancellor being held by the same person. In all opposition-ruled states, there have been instances to chancellors acting at the behest of their political masters in matters related to universities. Interests and statutes of the states have been sidelined in this regard. Rather than consulting the state governments, even on matters related to state-funded universities, governors have made political interference as chancellors. Such interferences will only be strengthened by the current draft regulations. There is also a large constitutional question at play with regard to the draft regulations. Can delegated legislation, that is, rules, regulations, notifications, etc., framed by the union government and its agencies under a union law, overrule the provisions of a plenary state law? It underlines a critical constitutional issue regarding the scope of delegated legislation and their potential for eroding the separation of powers and federalism, both of which are considered as basic features of the Indian Constitution. This question of law has its bearing on center-state relations as a whole, issues pertaining to which I had briefly mentioned earlier.